You are now live.
Welcome everyone to the opening presentation for the study group's 2020-21 season. Each season we try to bring speakers that will help you in your practice. We do this by scheduling speakers that explain new laws and strategies to best serve your clients. Last year we had speakers discuss how to promote your clients' values and family harmony in their estate plan. This season, in addition to our standard programming, we want to address how to better serve our clients and community by focusing on the importance of diversity and inclusion. I'd like to thank Glenn Mead for sponsoring today's presentation. Our speaker today, Alicia Wilson, is a Vice President of Economic Development for Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Health System in Baltimore, Maryland. As her bio reflects, Alicia is one of the most accomplished, thoughtful, and caring people you will meet. If you have any questions for Alicia during her presentation, please email them to Angela Monroe at angela@msba.org. And now I'd like to welcome Alicia Wilson.
Unmute. Thank you, Michael, for that very kind introduction. And thank you to the MSBA and everyone that's tuned in for coming to this session. I'm going to have I was so excited, I almost didn't sleep last night about being able to talk to you because this is such an important topic and one where a lot of people have more maybe questions than answers. But what I want to do is to provide you with some real thoughtful reflections on how you can move forward on the issue of diversity. And so I titled this talk, Beyond Diversity, How to Drive Diversity Outcomes. And essentially, what you'll hear throughout this presentation is I really have a different concept of what does it take to achieve diversity outcomes and what have been some of the challenges that we've all confronted when dealing with this term. And then I hope path forward. Let me say this, I welcome every question you have. So please put them in the chat. I will answer them as we go along. So I'm happy to answer them as we go along. If you have a point and say, Alicia, I really have a question right there, or I can take them at the end, whatever is best for you. So why don't we get started with this concept? And so the first question really I pose is, not that one. Okay, is, what is diversity? So if you just think about the term, right? If you go to a number of different dictionaries, and I picked 3 just for ease. If I went to Merriam-Webster and talked about the condition of having or being composed of different elements, especially the inclusion of different types of people in a group or an organization. I go to Cambridge Dictionary and it talks about the fact of many different types of things or people being included in something, a range of different things or people. When I went to Oxford Dictionary, it talks about a range of many people or things that are different from one another. There's a problem fundamentally with the definition of diversity, which I think it contributed in many respects to what we are seeing or witnessing. And it's really because diversity is a noun. It is many times constructed as a state of being rather than an action-oriented verb. And I use this quote that actions prove who someone is, words just prove who they want to be. And so there's not an institution, not an individual, not a group that wouldn't say, yes, I want to be more diverse. I want the outcome of diversity. I want to have as many different people included in the conversation, included at the table. Maybe there are people who say that would disagree. But I think fundamentally, publicly, everyone would say diversity is a good thing. The problem is, one, it doesn't tell you the action necessary in order to get us there. And none of those definitions really imply that it is the difficulty or even addresses the difficulty. Let me also say this at the outset. Diversity is one of those concepts where I know that individuals may think, I know very little about it. I'm not diverse. The reality is you have some level of diversity within you. And diversity is really situational, right? And so it does matter, what does the group look like today in order to have a reference point of what would make it a much different mix. And so when you look at whatever talk we're talking about, your law firm, whether we're talking about your section, your committee, whether we're talking about boards, C-suites, partnership ranks, it always is good to have a reference point of what we're talking about. So what's the difficulty? Why is it so difficult? And don't think I'm going to leave you with the difficulty and not give you a part of the solution. But I really think, and these are Alicia's difficulty framework, but I want you to certainly think of others of why it's difficult. But I really think it boils down to about 5 things. 1, the limitations of the term. 2, the fierce urgency of now. And you may say, well, hold on, that's a great quote from Dr. King. Like, how could the fierce urgency of now contribute to the difficulty of driving diversity outcomes? I'm going to get into that. Inertia. So don't worry, those who aren't that good in physics, I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about in inertia in this context. The fear of failure. And then I think the assignment. The confusion about what is the assignment or what are the actions necessary in order to drive diversity outcomes. I think that difficulty contributes to why we may observe and why the fact of the matter is that it exists, it's factual. We are not as diverse in almost any institution that we talk about in this country because of, I believe, these difficulties. And so I'm going to take them one by one. So the limitations of the term diversity. So diversity is a noun. My mother would tell me nouns and verbs are different, Alicia. It's important to know the state of speech. But I think we have to reclassify the word diversity as a verb. And I don't need to tell any of you syntax or grammar, and that's not this lesson. But diversity requires action. It requires a set of actions. It's not a state of being. It's not a constant. It actually requires a great deal of effort. Let me give you an example. Some of you may be in a firm, and if you look around, you may see a certain demographic, right? And if it's your own firm, it may be, you may have done, which is something that is natural. It happens just organically. You look to preserve yourself, right? You look to preserve yourself. So sometimes, Trigger, you might think about it. You may have picked, I'm short, 4'11". I sometimes say 5 feet, but I'm 4'11". I know that usually if I'm picking a team, I pick a little shorter people. I like short people. I think they're great people, smartest people in the world. I also have a tendency to pick people from Baltimore. I enjoy being able to not have to talk or explain myself when I'm talking about crabs or snowballs or any of the Orioles or the Ravens. I don't like that conflict. I like to have people who understand and fit in that way. You may also find yourself, if you play sports, you look up and everybody that's surrounded around you played lacrosse or played baseball, played football. It is a natural phenomenon. Woman, you may say like, oh, I'm a woman. Look at how many women I have around me. That happens frequently without even any ill intent. And we're not going to talk about intentions. We're going to talk about actions, because really you can't get into anyone's head about what they think. All you can really assess are actions. And so how do you break against this issue of this natural inertia of having you self-preserve yourself, whether it be in choosing who's going to be on the committee, who's going to be invited to the event, who's going to be invited into your firm, who's going to be appointed into partnership. How do you fight against this? And really, how do you think about broadening the network and the experiences and the exposure that you have to individuals that are very much different than yourself? How do you understand and come up to the concept of really thinking through what's the verb, what are the things that I'm going to do to really disrupt that natural tendency? And sometimes diversity is difficult because if it is used as a verb, it is disruptive to the status quo. And you need to prepare yourself. If you set out and you say, I'm going to drive diverse outcomes, recognize that this is extremely disruptive work. The second limitation that I would say, and the difficulty with diversity, is the fierce urgency of now. And Dr. King, there's a quote of Dr. King, and it says, we're now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. There's no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. And diversity is one of those areas where there is a fierce urgency of now. And what does that fierce urgency that people feel, what does it do for most? It immobilizes you, right? Because what you say is, there are things that the outcome is, the status quo is X, right? I look around and I see that I have a firm full of all women. If you have that, applaud yourself, but it probably is not the case. You may have a firm of majority men, majority, whatever characteristic we want to talk about, majority white, majority, whatever. You could pick any metric. The challenge is you look around and you see that and you say, so, okay, maybe I'm too late. Maybe it's too complicated, right? I can't find anyone. I can't even think about getting to change this dynamic. I'm just like immobilized. Like what can I do to change this? And I don't have any more seats, right? You may think like, I don't have any more seats at the table. It is what it is. On the committee, there's 12 seats. I only have 12 seats. And now you feel an immobilizing feeling of shame, right? You see the status quo and you think, you know what? I'd really like to change the status quo, but actually I can't change it because I'm bound in some way. I'm bound by resources. I'm bound by numbers of seats. I'm bound by just my network. I don't know anyone. I don't know how to change this. And so this fact that we keep saying being immobilized really results in us not doing and harnessing what we can do today. And I'm going to talk about in each of these situations what you can do. So don't worry, we're going to be action oriented in this lesson. But you may say, Alicia, I know just what you mean. We feel like that as a firm. I feel like that as a committee chair. I feel like that in my board. I feel like that in many different instances. We're going to talk about how you can break down that difficulty. The third difficulty, I would say, is inertia. Inertia is a concept I learned in 10th grade in physics. And it's a property by which things at rest stay at rest, or things in motion stay in motion. How does that apply? And what is the difficulty in that? It is when things are going well. And this even becomes harder when things aren't going well, right? The impulse is not to change whatever it is, not to change in that moment, to change only those things that are wrong or that cost me something or that are painful or that matter or are priorities. And so you have places that say, I'd be glad to give a little bit of money. We even saw this maybe a couple of months ago. Glad to give a little bit of money. But if you start talking about changing leadership, changing who's at the table, that's going to take time, right? That's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lifetime to change. And so the inertia of remaining in place on things that matter in terms of diversity, that impulse is real and it's sticky. It is hard to move an organization into meaningful change because the change is going to mean that, what's at rest is going to have to get into motion, and things that may be in motion may have to stop. And I'll get into what things might be in motion that need to stop and what things that aren't, that should be pushed into motion. The next difficulty is the fear of failure. And this is a quote I often say, that the price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake. I find in the diversity space, or when even the discussion comes up, there's a certain segment of the room that may be uncomfortable saying things behind closed doors, but not really. When it comes up, you want to sit back and wait for fear of saying something that might be offensive. The fear of doing something wrong, right? The fear of saying, I put in this strategy and it didn't work. I started on this path and we thought it was going to result in X, and I don't see any results. They're going to think we failed. And we as lawyers, the last thing we want to do is fail. I mean, we don't even want to go into a trial failing. We don't want to lose a client. We don't want to lose a case. We want to be on the upside of every deal. We make our money based on that. And so we really have to, and I just realized my chat is up at the top. Everybody close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't look, don't look, don't look. Okay. Yep. No, somebody gave a good. We're already getting good comments, so please keep them coming. But you may feel like I could make a mistake. I could say something wrong. I could get it wrong. And I can say that fear is unfounded. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Okay. The assignment. Oftentimes, diversity outcomes, and I think this is a challenge, and why we maybe don't see as much change as we would like, is because diversity outcomes are often evaluated by the tribe. And for those Star Wars fans, you know that Yoda said one of the most profound things that's ever been said in a movie. Do or do not, there is no try. So we don't try on any other metric in business and become satisfied, right? You know what? You try to bring in business, but after 30 years, you bring in none. You try to win cases, but it never happens. But you are amazing. You try to do this and you still get a gold star. Diversity is one of those areas where you get gold stars for trying. You don't even have to get to the goal line. You get accolades. You get awards for trying, for your efforts. But you don't get evaluated by your outcomes. There is no try. It is to do or do not. And we'll get into what can you do to address that, and how can you move into what I call Yoda land, which is to do when it comes to this. So, see something. Okay, so driving toward diverse outcomes and steps to putting things into motion. Just realized it says verb. Don't look at that. But reclassify diversity as a verb, not as a verb, but as a verb. And when I talk about reclassifying it as a verb, getting into the process of thinking about an action, thinking about a thing to do, thinking about it not as a state of being, to be, counting of people or counting of this or that, but really thinking through what is the action in this instance and everything you touch that I can do to make it more diverse. And that leads me to step 2, and to this question of the fierce urgency of now, which is the urgency of the action, right? How do you not become immobilized by that? Distinguish between what must change right now and what must be done right now, right? So when you talk about diversity, there are things that must change right now. And there are things that must be done right now. They are separate, right? This is where I think many of us get confused, and where, in thinking of how these steps tie into one another. When you talk about what is people getting rewarded for tries, they should be rewarded for efforts now that will yield a result later on. But the change that must happen now is very different. So let's think about this. So what are some things that can be done right now, right? It's all of the decisions that are within your hand right now. You may have you may have a committee, okay? The committee changes over every 4 years, every 2 years, every 3 years. Your employment, right? You can invite new partners into your firm every year that have a book of business. But associates you might hire every 2 years based on just workflow and a number of other factors. Your committee, right? You may say, I only have 12 seats. All 12 are contributing. Well, that means you have to enlarge the committee and put forth a concerted effort to recruit 3 people who are not like the others, right? So let's say you have a committee and it's filled with all people over the age of 60, right? Do you know how unsustainable that is? It's just unsustainable. Let's say you have a firm filled with everyone that's 27. Unsustainable. Both of those are unsustainable. So I'm using age as a factor, right? Right now. Unsustainable. The 60-year-olds, the reality is some of them are going to retire. In whether it be 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, they're going to retire. They're at the sunset of their career. You got a whole team of 27-year-olds. You know what's going to be the rub? You're going to lose them. You're going to lose men when they have children. You're going to have women who, when they realize that they're being paid less and they can go make more money in something else, when life shifts, when things happen, you're going to lose people. And so what do you want to do? You want to make sure that you have a diverse set of folks at the table. So you might have to recruit in a way that's going to be much more costly. Now, why do I say that? Right? Because if you do not, and this gets into the point which I'll make in a moment, the price of not diversifying, right? And not being active in diversity efforts at all times means that when you wake up and you say, I want to have a woman that is Black who does tax, because you just woke up and everyone around you maybe woke up at the same time, and there was no cultivation of a Black female 5 years ago. If there's a Black female that does tax, you're going to have to recruit her with a greater sense of urgency, with a greater amount of money than you would if the market was filled with them, right? It's just supply and demand, right? If your corporate client starts saying, I want to see my litigation team reflect the community, if you didn't put in the work to start building that, when it comes time, when that question is asked, you're going to pay a premium. It just is the byproduct. That's going to mean it costs more to change right now than it does to do something right now that's going to yield a different result. Maybe not for you, but for the marketplace in general. So in the instance of you're recruiting for your committee, you have to recruit right now. You're going to have to exert effort to change that committee, just the complexion of it. Because the market, no one was really focused on changing the market, doing now for the future. But we do in every other metric in our businesses. We make real estate decisions. We make decisions about other personnel. We make decisions about copy paper. We know if we need copy paper, let's just put think about COVID. Those people that were consistent in keeping up certain supplies, they didn't have to pay a premium. But the rest of us, when we got caught unaware, we started paying inordinate prices for something that we could have done now for the future. So diversity is no different. Think about what you can do now, right? You have committees, you have firms, you have people who are, there are two programs I'm involved in. One that's an amazing program through the Maryland State Bar, which is the Law Links program. I was actually in the Law Links program when I was 15 years old. I can tell you, I would not have been a law firm partner. I wouldn't have been an associate. I wouldn't have been a circuit court law clerk if someone didn't do that at that point, not that long ago, so I'm not that old. If they hadn't invested in that program, that was what they needed to do in that now. The now of today of what you have to do to recruit, to change your committee of So you could do that now, right? What you can do now for the future is invest in maybe in pipelining programs. The Diverse Attorney Pipeline Program, I'm on the board of that out of Chicago, recruiting diverse talent, trying to just continue to create the marketplace, fill the marketplace as much as we can with diverse talent. That's something you can do now that will pay off in huge dividends in the future. But what you also can do now is enlarging your committee, right? So you have a committee of 12, make it 15. Is there something special about the number 12? No, make it 15. So doing those things, make distinguishing between what must change now. The composition of this committee has to change now. The composition of our partnership has to change now. We're going to have to pay a little bit of a price, greater price now to change that. We're going to do now things that are going to get young people interested in our profession, young people interning, young people connected and networked toward us, law students networked and connected toward us. We're going to host events at our firm that are going to be geared towards ensuring that diverse talent understands what estates and trust is, right? Gets attracted towards our section of law, right? But if we're talking about the committee, we might have to think about different criteria. Maybe you have to invite some third-year law students to sit on your section, whereas you wouldn't have before. Maybe you're going to have to figure out how to think about some people who are in practice areas that are in their first or second year that are maybe aligned with thinking about moving over into your section. So thinking about, how do we shift in that way? The third point was inertia. And I don't want to make this a science lesson, but inertia is about, an object or something at rest remains at rest, or an object in motion remains in motion. You got to put into practice, I think, to resist that Newton's third law of motion, which is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Now, I'm going to put a little bit on Newton's third law, which I think is going to be helpful for you in understanding this. And it ties back into my step 3. The reality is that your actions will have an equal reaction, but it may not be immediate, right? It may not be immediate. I didn't say when I talked about some things are just not going to be immediate, but there will be a reaction that will be equal. So what do I mean? So if you begin thinking about putting forth the action to change, let's just talk about this on an individual level, right? You say, you know what? If someone asks me for 4 people to recommend for X, and this is how you can test the limitations of your network. Someone asked me for 4 lawyers to refer 4 lawyers to them that are Black and female. How many could you come up with that you would personally vouch for? 1, 2, 3? If you can only come up with 3, or you can only come up with 1, or you struggle to come up with 1, you, 1, are out of network with whomever they are, and they are out of network with you. Both of you lose. Okay? So put forth the effort to try to meet those people. The good news is that there's something called the internet. And then there's even better news that there's something on the internet called LinkedIn. And there's something on the internet called, your attorney, the attorney book. I can't even remember the name of it. Don't say that. But the directory that comes out, that's what it's called, every year. Go out and try to find people that are extremely different. Reach out, take them to coffee, take them to lunch. Both of you are in an untenable position. It's not just the folks who are in the majority that are in the untenable. The people in the minority are in the untenable. Both of you aren't connected, and you should be for a whole host of reasons. But the fact is that diversity yields better results. I didn't even get to that fundamental observation, but let me just go back there and tell you about why diversity matters, because I think it's important. And I should have done this at the outset. Diversity matters because you get a better outcome. A better outcome. You can give me any criteria, I can tell you can get a better outcome. But let me tell you, just like fundamentally, an example of how diversity yields you a better result. So if you were investing $1 million, yep, I'm going to say it, you have it, $1 million, right? And you went to a financial planner, financial planner said, you know what, you have $1 million. We're going to buy $1 million worth of Ford Motor Company. No, let me give you an easier one. We're going to buy $1 million worth of stock of Amazon. That's what we're going to buy. You'd be like, So that's financial planner number one. Financial planner number two says, we're going to purchase Amazon, but we're also going to purchase a little bit of oil. We're going to purchase a little bit of a couple of different industries, spread your risk across a whole other set of stock. Which advisor would you go with? Now, those of you who say Amazon, because Amazon's flying high, I think you're wrong. Actually, anyone would tell you you're wrong, because you can't have a stock portfolio that's filled with just one stock. I don't care what the stock is. Your risk is too concentrated. If you have a team that's not diverse on any different metric, age, ability in terms of disability, race, religion, ethnicity, gender, any metric, you aren't even spreading, just be self-interest. You're not spreading your risk. You're not getting the best ideas. You're not getting the best performance. And so really important for you to do that. I just wanted to make sure I made that at the outset. But you have to put in the effort and have to understand that it will yield results. Let me get to step number 4, which is the fear of failure. And I say this, that replace fear with faith. Fear and faith, I am a woman of faith. But if you aren't, doesn't matter. We're going to still talk about faith. But fear and faith have the same principle. Fear is the belief that something bad is going to happen that hasn't happened yet. And faith is the belief that something good is going to happen that hasn't happened yet. When you're talking about diversity and you're talking about embarking upon driving the outcome of diversity, you would probably say, I'll put in all this effort and it's going to yield nothing. But I can tell you, if you have that mindset and you believe nothing will happen, you are going to get what you believe. But if you have the outset mindset and say, I am going to have faith that my efforts are going to yield a result, I can tell you that mindset shift is going to yield a result. I remember a partner one day made this statement, and I'm not saying his name because he was just being honest. There was no malintent in this. He said, every time we recruit a Black attorney, they do extremely well, and then we lose them. We invest a lot of time and training in them, and then we lose them. So, that I don't know if that's worth our effort. I said, well, let me say this one thing. Let's say you don't invest a lot of time and effort in them and they stay. And then let's take it a step further. Have you thought about the time and effort you put into other demographics and lost them? People leave your institution. You don't own anyone's career. Just because you invest time and you train them and you do all those things, you still don't own their career. The trouble is that only one or two of a demographic get in the door, and you lose them and you feel it. You can't do this in one or two offs. And you also have to think about the marketplace, right? So you have to think of, we want the legal market to be such that that's not an issue. The one or two people that I lose, whether they be man or female, whether they be black or white, if there's talent still within the marketplace, I can still perform. My job, my firm can still do well if I contribute to that. And so a fear of failure, of not getting exactly right, of not saying the exact thing correct, of not going about it the right way, disabuse yourself of that, because right now you're not doing, and you may be doing, but you may not be really doing it like any other business metric. And that in itself is failure. Let me get you to this next piece, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Be action-oriented in driving outcomes. We as lawyers, myself included, are extremely privileged. I have a great deal of privilege. I do. I sit in rooms where decisions are being made about employment. I sit in rooms where by one call can mean that someone gets into a law school. I sit in rooms where we're deciding who gets a board seat, whether it be nonprofit or for-profit. I sit at tables where I think about like who gets to serve on certain committees, who gets law clerk positions, who gets to become judges. Recognize the power of the privilege of where you are. And you may say, I don't have privilege. Yes, you do. You are educated in this country. You are privileged. You have the ability, but you may not harness it for the good of our community. And you have to. Think about if you are a seasoned attorney, the privilege that you have to be able to think about looking at someone not like you and helping them to understand the discussions that you had, the things that you know that have contributed to your career being a success. That knowledge is valuable, extremely valuable. And there's not one young person that wouldn't take you up on that offer. And I always tell young people, there's not one attorney that you call that's not going to answer your call. Think about it. You see someone young in your career, and I think about people like, she was just a beacon of light, but I think of people like Sheila Sachs and Larry Greenwald and Bob Kellner and Barry Rosen, all of these folks who were at my law firm, Kathy Bledsoe, Cyril Mitnick. I mean, there's just so many. Mark Blum, who would go out of their way to say, let me tell you about how to build a book of business. Let me tell you about how to do well in this. Let me tell you about a mistake I had and how I overcame it. Let me introduce you to a couple of people who you might need to know. Let me take you to coffee for this or that. Zoom's free. You don't even have to buy coffee anymore. Think about how you can contribute to this community. And then when you get networked and you like the person, you believe they're smart and hardworking, take a chance. Say, you know what, this committee that I used to be on this committee, but let me tell you about a young person I think should be on this committee. Or let me tell you about not so young a person that should be on this committee. Let me tell you about this person that you should, I know y'all are recruiting for your fall recruitment. Let me tell you about someone that you should make sure that's in that portfolio. Do what you can, be action oriented around where you are, and recognize that putting someone else and allowing someone else in the door doesn't mean that 5 have to go out. Right? That's never been, you never thought when you were having children, if we have one more baby, one of them has to get out of this house. No, what? You don't do that. Because we want more, one has to get out of here. No, add. Diversity doesn't mean divide. Add to the group, add to the table, add to the committee, add to whatever to yield a different outcome. And I promise you that we will, when you do that, you'll be driving diversity outcomes. I do want to allow for questions, and I have already one question in the chat. Someone said, oh, this is funny. It's funny, I'm 71 and never want to choose my cohort group members for anything I'm involved in. Being around all older people is not my preference. Anyone else my age prefer a mixed group and not just older folk. Well, I can tell you that young people, I like to have a diverse group. I think it's fun. I think it's preferable to have a mix. And it's funny you're saying you don't want to be around older folks, but yeah, no, I completely understand and completely agree. And it's good that you want to shift and have people of different groups as a part of your network. Excellent. I see we have some more coming in. Let's see. All right, let me answer another question. So how do you get started in creating a much more diverse network? I think one thing you should do is, again, think about the law schools and think about other bar associations. So, you're a member of the MSBA, reach out to the Monumental City Bar, the Alliance of Black Women Attorneys. When I was president, I got to co-sponsor a number of events with other bars, with majority bars. I was a member of the MSBA, a member of the Bar Association of Baltimore City. If you're thinking about how can we diversify, even within your law firm, I think people having the chance to interact and become comfortable is really important part of really being able to pursue and get to a more diverse outcome. Let's see, do we have any more questions or statements? You can email statements or questions if you like. Okay, none right now. All right. Oh, okay, we got a comment around the try is no longer enough. Yeah, it is like be reduced. I think that's a really important point. And you can quote Yoda if you want. Don't quote Alicia, but quote Yoda. And when you think about that, think about when you are, within an organization, no longer say, we really have tried. And when people say that and they become despondent, and I think they're sincere when they say, we're trying to diversify, we're trying to do this. Don't have them be despondent, right? Because the try, if it is a try that is not leading, it may be leading, they may try and they may believe that it's going to yield a result right now. And the reality is that their try may be yielding a result far into the future. Distinguish between the two. Are we trying to change this committee, or are we trying to change the profession in our field? Two different things. Don't conflate the two. If you conflate the two, you will become frustrated and ashamed, because you won't be, if you're doing an action that's going to yield a result 10 years from now, and your expectation is that it's going to yield a result today, you're going to actually become weary and faint of heart because that expectation is going to be delayed. Just by virtue of the fact that the input you're putting in is not yielding a result and cannot yield a result that is closer in time. And so, be conscious of what your action is yielding, right? So if you're in your law firm, you're like, we want to change profits, we want greater profits next year. That's a different sort of action than saying we have a growth plan over the course of the next 5 years to yield this in profits and revenue. And this is our path forward to the 5-year time horizon. But today we have to take this action to yield this result today. And that's the same in the diversity context, right? If you want a different result today, you have to, calibrate yourself. And I know we are running up on time. Let me close out on a couple of different points, and let me stop sharing. Let me close out on a couple of different points. One, I want to say thank you to you all, and thank you to Micah Snitzer and so many others for William Hall and so many others for having me here today. I think it's an honor and a privilege to get to talk on this topic. I think that for you who are people who clearly, because you're here, interested in driving outcomes, I want you to not be weary. I want you to not give up, and knowing that it is a process. There are things you can do now. Hopefully I gave you some thought process on what you can change now. And then there are things that you can do to change the future. And we have to have courage. Let me say this, you're not alone. Sometimes we can think, I've got to, we don't have the result we want today. And so you feel ashamed and you're like, I don't know. Let me just bury my head in the sand. You don't do that on any other thing. We're not those type of people. Lawyers, we are problem solvers, solution oriented. If you in your head have that desire, your heart has to move. And I hope that it moves to being, putting forth the action. You're not alone. Again, I think all of you, I'm not that hard to find out or figure out or get in contact with, but please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk through something with you, happy to think through, happy to network you into any of those groups that could help you, whether you're on either side of this, right? You are trying to get into the mainstream, or you're in the mainstream and you're trying to get into opening up the door. I can help you on either side, and I'm happy to do so. So again, I'm just grateful for this opportunity, and thank you for having me today.